Right, for Kuf Beis Amud Aleph 102a. I just want to make a correction. We said that Achav, we mentioned Achav as one of the kings who served idol worship, and his advisor Yehu was a tzaddik, but otherwise messed up because of earlier Achia Shaloni. So I mentioned that Achav was a king in the southern kingdom. That was incorrect. He was in the northern kingdom. Yeah, my correction. And it's some 6 or 7 generations later. It's quite a bit later. Anyway, okay. So we're on discussion about the mistakes that Yerovam made as the king, the first king to split the kingdom, the first one to break away from the Davidic line. And we talked yesterday about how 2 days ago how he got support from even someone as otherwise righteous as Achia Shiloni. So more on that comes now, how he veered the people away from Hashem. We mentioned the root cause as arrogance, and we're going to explore a bit about that as well. But first, the Gemara takes a bit of a detour for a few minutes to talk about this idea of opportune times. And that is Vayihi Be'esahi. The line begins with the word Becherev, and the second word of Vayihi Be'esahi is a little hey. It's about a quarter from the top of the page. There's the words Becherev, and then before the second word, which is Vayihi, there's a small little hey. That's the next verse that the Gemara analyzes right there. You have it? It's 102a, Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. Okay. Becherev, and the next word is Vayihi. That's it. So the verse reads, Vayihi Be'esi, and it wasn't that time. Yerovam and Yerovam, this is in Kings 1. It's a description there of Yerovam becoming king. And then we've already quoted quite a bit from those verses, from those chapters. Kings chapter 1, chapter 2. So it says, Vayihi Be'esi, and it wasn't that time. Yerovam Yotzim in Yerushalayim, and Yerovam leaves Jerusalem. V'yimtza oisi Achia Shiloni, and he finds Achia Shiloni, Hanavi the prophet we mentioned earlier, who he swayed to come onto his side to sign the declaration of his support for Yerovam's claim to the throne. And we said the mistake was they didn't stipulate specifically that this is on condition that he does not go to idol worship, and that was the mistake because it did lead to idol worship. So in this context, or just before this, I guess, Yerovam meets Achia Shiloni, the prophet, B'derech, on the way, Vumiskasa, and Achia Shiloni is wearing, or is covering himself, B'salma Chadasha, in a new garment. Okay, so the Gemara is going to analyze in a moment what this Salma Chadasha is, why it's important to know that he's wearing a new garment. Like, who cares what he's wearing? But the verse makes a point to tell us that he's wearing a new garment. So there must be some allusion, some message here. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But first the Gemara addresses the opening statement, which was Vayihi Be'esi, and it was at that time. It could have just said Vayihi, and it was. Or it was when Yerovam was going out. Why at that time? Which is not an unusual term for the verse, but nonetheless, at the surface doesn't even seem necessary to the narrative. So says the Gemara, Tana, we've been taught, Mishum Rabbi Yesi and Rabbi Yesi. Esi Mizumenes the Peranis. Because the verse says it was at that time, indicating there's something about that time that makes it unique for that meeting. So said Rabbi Yossi, this is a time, Mizumenes means like ready or prone to catastrophe. As if to say, there are times and places, as we'll see, that are prone to good, and times and places that are prone to negative. And the Gemara now is going to list a few verses that indicate one way or the other throughout Scripture. I wonder if these are all of them. You can get the Concordinitza. I'm sure there are more. Why these samples are chosen is in itself a good question, but the principle applies, I believe, universally throughout all of Scripture. So the Gemara first begins with Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, which is actually not about a specific time, but talking about a time that's to come. Which is Be'ez P'godasim Yavedu. At that time of God's remembering them, Yavedu, they shall be Yavedu means lost or like destroyed. In other words, the prophet saying at the due time, at the opportune time, when it's ready for God to exact retribution, so it shall happen. So again, the same idea. Tanam Rishon Rabbi Yosi, it was taught in Rabbi Yosi, there is this time that shall come, which is prone or destined for catastrophe, and that's the time when this punishment will be exacted. Likewise, in the positive sense, this is in Yeshaya, that God will answer the Jewish people and bring salvation, right, and bring them back to Eretz Yisrael, as the verse describes there. It's in Isaiah 49. It says the pasuk, Be'es ratzin inisicha, anisicha. In the right, in the ratzin, Be'es ratzin is a willful hour. It means a time of my will, when God's grace, ratzin could be grace or will, and Yisich to be answered. Meaning to say, there's this time when it's opportune time to ask for grace, and that's the time when it's going to happen. So similar to Mishum Rabbi Yosi taught, this is an opportune time for good. And again, another verse. So a few samples we're bringing up here. This is in Shemais.
It's after the Egel.
After the Egel, yeah. This is during Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu's conversation. So Hashem said, in the time when I'll remember, when my remembrance shall be remembered upon them their sin, and then it'll go on to say that there's going to be this punishment. So again, Tana Mishum Rabbi taught, this is an opportune time for catastrophe.
Russia's made a Tisha.
Sorry?
Like Tisha, about 3 weeks in general.
3 weeks on Tisha B'Av, where throughout history many different events happen on Tisha B'Av, including as recent as the beginning of World War I.
Yeah, destruction of the temple.
Yeah, destruction of the temple and sorry? Beitar, the proclamation, drawing a blank. Spain, the expulsion.
Yeah.
The expulsion. That's it. Many other such things. Okay, Vayibeisi, another verse, Vayibeisi, it wasn't that time, Yehuda meis Achiv. Yehuda separated from his brothers. This is when Yehuda approaches Yosef.
No, this is with the Tamar.
No, sorry, yes, correct. When Tamar goes away, the next one's going to be about Yosef splitting away.
We have his 2 sons and they died.
Yeah, later it's going to be about Yosef splitting away.
They're known on. That's it.
Right, so it's going to, one second, let's bring up.
Yeah.
Soon it's going to bring up Yosef. Another context, sorry. This is when Yehuda goes away to be with his daughter-in-law, who he didn't know was his daughter-in-law. But so...
He lost 2 sons, for example. That's what
yeah. Tanur of Shom Yosef, again, the taught, this is an opportune time for calamity. Okay, so till now it's been about time. Opportune times for negative and opportune times for positive. I wonder what each of these things talk about. Why so many, why do we need all of these? And what each of these different samples teach us about this principle. Like time of year, time of day, time of week, time of month, time of... I don't know, I wonder. It'd be interesting to look up each of these verses and see the full context and see what it's talking about. It's talking about an era, or talking about a time of the year that recurs every year, a time of the week that recurs every week, or something like that. I wanted to see if we could kind of see what the uniqueness of each of these different verses and what they each teach us that we don't know from the other one. Be interesting. But the next one is clear that it talks about a place, not just a time.
Some of them are dates and some of them are
epochs, or times.
After the selling of Yosef, then this thing happened with Yehuda.
That doesn't seem to be what the verse is saying.
Well, that Rashi brings it from Midrash. That's why he was at that time. Why I mentioned, because it's connected. Like he went down from his brothers and so on.
Not here. The Gemara Rashi doesn't say that here.
No, Rashi is in the Chumash.
Chumash.
That's why Yehuda went down. I mean, he went down in his position, the whole situation.
Yeah, but here we're not talking about Vayered. Here we're analyzing the fact that it says Be'esahi at that time. Meaning to say that that time.
After the selling of Yosef. So it's not so much a day in the year, but it's after a certain
time. Okay. Meaning one event is negative leads to another negative event.
Exactly.
And the verse which describes punishment in the future time could be like an epoch, not necessarily a day.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're talking about Yerava meeting it could be a specific day. I don't know. I wonder what each of these things tell us. Anyway, so now we're talking about a location. Says the Gemara, it's Vayelech Rechavam. Getting back to, actually now it's not Yeravam, it's Rechavam. Rechavam is the king of the southern kingdom, the son of Shlomo Melech, who is in the right line but misbehaved in that he also brought about idol worship. And the verse reads, Vayelech Rechavam Shechem. Yeravam left Yerushalayim, and we'll discuss that in a minute, what this means that he left Yerushalayim, and went to Shechem. Why Shechem? So the verse continues, Ki Shechem ba kol Yisrael ha'amlech Isai, because the people gathered in Shechem to crown him as king. So this is where he went. Tana Mishum Rabbi Yossi, so we've been taught in Rabbi Yossi. This is all Rabbi Yossi teaching this idea. Makom mizum leporanes. The place Shechem is an opportune place for calamity. Till today it's a place of contention. And the verse lists a few things that happened in Shechem that make it, or that indicate to us that it's a place ready for calamity. Number one, B'Shechem inu es Dina. Number one, in Shechem they persecuted Dina. B'Shechem, in the city of Shechem, right? Dina was raped, and there was the whole issue there with Dina. Dina, of course, being the daughter of Yaakov and the brother of the 12 tribes, the sister of the 12 tribes. B'Shechem, in the city of Shechem, Yosef, the brothers sold out their younger brother Yosef into slavery. And here, B'Shechem, the kingdom of David was split in Shechem. Because Rechavam becomes king here, and Yeravam elsewhere. So it's a place destined for misfortune. I'm just thinking out loud, but all of these events indicate a split. When the calamity with Dinah, it wasn't just the calamity against Dinah, but it caused Shimon and Levi, the story that follows that Shimon and Levi went and killed the whole town, which caused them to get retribution from their brothers. It caused a split in the blessings of Yaakov to his children. It caused a split between the brothers. Likewise, Yosef being sold, of course, caused a split. And here as well, it caused a split between the Jewish people, and then it split the kingdom. So I just, before we continue, I want to just mention, I said this, I would explain this yesterday. In general, what do we mean that it's an Eis Ratzin, an opportune time? Or Eis Perani is a time of calamity. When you're talking about God himself or the spiritual realm, there is no time and there's no change, right? It's not as if even in general, today's Shabbos, and we say Shabbos is a spiritual level or something, spiritual revelation, and Sunday, whatever divine revelation that exists on Shabbos didn't exist on Sunday. God's changing his revelations. What's going on? So this explains that all of these things always exist. But because we are subject to time, so our time moves within the spectrum of the divine truth that always exists. Follow? So if you think about it if we had this roof above us had like a little opening window, right? And that window moved along the roof. Right? So there could be a bunch of different lights above the roof, a bunch of different colors, and the light we get in our room will change based on where that little window shifts. Right? So all the things always exist. The question is which one we get to access at a particular time or a particular location. But they always exist. In other words, the level of Shabbos always exists. It's just a question of when we get to access it, and that happens on Shabbos. The same thing is true with all these opportune times and opportune locations. It's not that these things don't exist otherwise. It's only that we get our time is like a little window, if you will, to receive a certain thing. Or another way of putting it is that we think of time, or we experience time as linear, meaning you travel from one point in time to another, keep moving forward. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, actually time is more like a triangle, in which that at the beginning of the year there's all the time for the whole year invested, and then it slowly manifests throughout the year, first in months, and then in weeks, and then in days, and then in hours, and then in minutes, and then in seconds, right? So it's not like you move from one to the next, but rather they slowly emerge from the original place, right? So point being that all the things already exist. All the things that we experience in time already exist. It's just a question of in our world, we only experience one of these things at a time. Right? Follow?
I mean,
I understand. I mean, all of it exists at all times in potential. I mean, God chooses, right, when He wants to reveal, to make that revelation, whether it's a Yom Kippur, or whether it's a Chag or a Shabbos.
But Yom Kippur always exists in the spiritual realm.
Right.
We only get to experience it once a year.
Right, but I mean, it's because He chooses the time for the revelation. Right?
Yeah.
He's if it's Shabbos in the world, it's because He dictates now it's going to be Shabbos in the world.
But wait, what it is, it's not as if like God manifests a new revelation on Yom Kippur. It's that the window in our world opens up to the level of Yom Kippur. The level of divinity that exists in Yom Kippur always exists. Our world now gets a window to it on that day.
And there's Hashem being Matzah. I mean, there's
Right.
too, but Hashem's always there. We're more.
That's correct. So we get a window then.
What
Yeah,
we're
but
looking at
we get a window to
I
that.
think we're saying the same, but I'm sort of saying the flip side. He opens the window.
Yes, correct. He opens the window. But that means that's
I'm
true.
saying it's not like, okay, we decide to open the window.
Okay, he opens the window. That's correct. But here's the other interesting thing: that because it always exists, in theory, a person can always get to it.
That's right.
You just need to be someone who's powerful enough to puncture the limitations of time. In other words, time traps me in that I can only get to Yom Kippur on Yom Kippur. If I were such a person that can transcend that problem of time, then I can always access Yom Kippur. Right? There's a story. I think I told you this story once. There's a Maisa with I think it was Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, the students of the Baal Shem Tov, who they were worried that the reason why they feel Shabbos is not because they feel actually Shabbos, but because of the ambiance. They set up a meal and they daven for a certain amount of hours and they have all their friends and they dress a certain way, and that's why they feel Shabbos. They're not really feeling the spiritual level of Shabbos. They're feeling the creation of their ambiance. They decided, you know what, we're going to do a whole Shabbos on Wednesday. Test it out. Let's see if we feel it. So I can't vouch for the validity of the story or for it actually happening to the Baal Shem Tov, but I know that I heard from someone who's reliable, so I'm pretty sure the story happened. But the point is true either way, even if it didn't happen to the Baal Shem Tov. Yeah, so they did it on Wednesday, and they're going through their Shabbos. In the middle of their morning service, they start to feel Shabbos. So as soon as they start feeling Shabbos, they got upset. That means our Shabbos feeling is not real; it's fake. It's only because we created it. It's not because it's the real Shabbos. So they went to the Baal Shem Tov. They went to the Baal Shem Tov, or they went to their Rebbe, whoever it was, and the Rebbe told them that, did you notice that while you're davening, there was a young man who walked into shul? So he said, yeah, there's a young man walked into shul. We've never seen him before. So he says, okay, that young man was one of the hidden tzaddikim, and he lives Shabbos all week long. And when he walked in, he brought Shabbos with him, and you were feeling his Shabbos, meaning to say that the level of what Shabbos is always exists. And this is a fellow who's able to puncture the limitations of time and thus experience Shabbos even on Wednesday. And these Talmidim were able to siphon off that experience.
Isn't there a reference when the Gula comes, it's Shabbos?
That's correct. It's always Shabbos.
Yom
Shekule Shabbos. We say in our benching.
Yeah, like you'll feel Shabbos 7 days a week. Maybe different than actual Shabbos. A Shabbos
That's correct.
Feeling,
right. Which means like this. First of all, it means that a person should take these opportunities when they exist. Number one. Number two, even in a place where the Gemara says that there's a place or a time that's destined for calamity, a Jew doesn't have to be locked into that.
Yeah, we're above Muslim.
A Jew can transcend all this stuff. It's true that in accordance with the system of time, this place and this time is open to the window of negativity. But a Jew, if he's connected to Hashem himself, which transcends all these things, can transcend that problem also. Right, the famous story of Rabbi Parmishlan. The Rabbi used to share a story all the time that he used to go to the mikveh in a river that was in the bottom of a steep mountain and covered somewhere in Eastern Europe where it's covered in snow. Walking down a steep mountain to the river, it's quite dangerous. You can slip, and most people were scared to go down. But Meir would go every day, come up and down. There were some people who wanted to poke fun. It seems like at Meir Parmishlan, and they said, "Look, anybody can go down this steep thing." They went down and they started sliding down. So they came to the Meir and they asked him, "How do you do it? How do you walk every day? It's not like he doesn't walk balance, his hands out trying to balance. He just walks normally. How do you do it?" So he said in Yiddish, and everybody used to quote this all the time, "Has man is verbunden oben, fällt man nicht unten." If one is connected above, one doesn't fall below. That was his line. So in other words, even if it's a place that's opportune for negativity, if a person's connected to a higher location, if a person's connected to a higher place, to God himself, then which transcends this whole problem of time or place, then even if it happens to be a place and time that's opportune, as it were, for negative, doesn't mean he has to be in dominion with that.
But of course, the halacha goes to the rabbi. That's an example.
Sorry? A person's less to be worried for this thing. A person's, like, for example, a person's not allowed to go into a chorva. You're not allowed to walk into a place that's meant for negativity.
Money was, for example, a court case with a non-Jew.
You shouldn't do it during. That's correct.
You do it the month of Adar.
That's right. That's right. These things have a halachic application. That's right.
Yes, for the rabbi.
That during Av, which is opportune for negativity, a person should have a court case and shouldn't do things like that.
Also,
Yeah.
you should get Talmud during time. There's certain halachas of 3 weeks and so on because of this opportune time for things that make. So at
That's
the right
correct.
level, doesn't matter.
Even want to pass the tissues, please.
Yes, sure.
Even thank you. Even like if a person has a big deal or contract that they have to sign, they should push it to Tuesday. Even something like that, because the pasuk says Yom Shul, but it's the day that God says twice, ki twice. So if you could choose Monday or Tuesday, choose Tuesday. Things like that. I saw that Rabbi writes to somebody about buying a home when he should choose a date to sign the contract and buying a home. If told him if he can, should push it to Tuesday. Yeah.
That's not halacha though.
No, it's not halacha.
Because the teacher Bible so great. That's halacha.
Not halacha. It's the same idea.
That's advice.
It's a Torah Kamash Malan.
One of the obvious reasons why we can't feel Shabbos now is because we're working, right? The working man, the guy is out.
Yeah.
He's out.
Because we don't live in Shabbos all
We
week
don't.
long.
We can't. So,
That's right.
I was, in the Sikha I learned with Levi on Wednesday night. So the Rebbe was saying that after and in the Geula, the non-Jews will do the work of the Jews,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So when you're freed up to, basically learn for the whole feeling. That's why we feel Shabbos, because like that, you can be Shabbos-dik the whole week.
Because you have the time for it.
Yeah, because you have, it's very hard when you're, in the fields or in the office to feel Shabbos so much. But you can do the, you can do the mitzvahs, you can do.
Yeah, it's very interesting that, as we get through the different technological revolutions that have happened over time, so the problems were not that people couldn't afford things, because things become cheaper as automation happens. What causes unrest is that people have nothing to do. Right? It's not like automation is making everything cheaper. So even if you had a lower paying job, but you can live better because you can buy a meal for $2 now. Right? So the big question that the thinkers of the future are thinking about is what people are going to do when they have everything available and they don't need to do anything to get that stuff. What are they going to be doing? And when I'm listening to this stuff, I'm yelling in my head, this is a prophecy.
Exactly.
Right? The Rambam describes that everything's going to be done, malat and nas, and everything happens automatically.
Yeah, automation.
All your work is done. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to, even today, you have to work not nearly as hard as somebody else has to get bread. You have to work the field. You go to the grocery store and buy bread for $1.50. How much do you have to work to get a slice of bread? And you have all this time freed up to explore Torah, to learn Hashem, to get to know Hashem more. It's an opportunity that didn't exist. Talking about Eis Ratzon, this is an opportunity that exists that didn't exist ever in history. The amount of availability we have to discover and learn.
The only problem is that the two things that have come up in expenses is the real estate, especially in Jewish areas, and the yeshiva tuition. That automation hasn't taken care of both of those. Those are major consumptions of a person.
Yeah, but
you're right. The other things like clothing or shvarim.
But to me, it's a. If you're looking on the graph of if you look at the graph of 50 years, it looks terrible. If you look at the graph of 1,000 years, it's amazing. In other words, it's true that real estate and tuition are going up and things like that. But we don't.
You have 3-4 children.
Thank God I have Baruch Hashem, I have 4 boys. I'm very aware of what the costs of tuition, and I'm also very aware of the costs of real estate.
Birth control is right now for Jews.
Yeah, that's
because of the cost of tuition.
I understand it very well. I'm not denying the issues, and I believe over the next 15, 20 years we'll figure it out. It's going to take time, we'll figure it out. But you have to think about the problem of tuition. The problem of tuition didn't exist 100 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know why? Because there was no yeshiva that had tuition.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had a son who so happened to be the one genius in town, he learned with the teacher. When we think of yeshivas 150 years ago, it was maybe one little teacher sitting around in the shul with 6 other students.
Like this, a table like this.
A table like this, and that was the whole. That was the whole
building too. They didn't
that was the whole. That was the whole yeshiva.
They dug in there.
And that's it. And most kids didn't make it past 10, 11 years old when they could read. When they could read and maybe learn a little Yiddish, they can read Beis Yaakov, Beis Yehuda Siddur, or Beis Yehuda Chumash, a Korban Mincha Siddur, and then the Korban Mincha Siddur and the Beis Yehuda Chumash is the Yiddish. It was like the popularized Yiddish Chumash and Siddur for women and children to be able to learn because they were illiterate. They couldn't understand Hebrew, and that was it. And maybe one in a town, once every generation or two, there was a kid who was worthy enough, and he would sit and learn with the rabbi one-on-one, and that's it.
So what did the thousands of children in the great centers of Poland and Russia do? I'm talking in the 20th century or the late 19th century.
The great centers are the big.
Where the previous rabbi's father was the rabbi. I mean, there was thousands of Jewish children.
Yeah,
It must have been schools full of kids.
Yeah, that's only in the last 150, 200 years.
Right, but was there no tuition for these kids?
I wonder.
It wasn't much.
I wonder because they mostly went to the first big yeshiva, like in that sense, is maybe Volozhin, and then like not Chaim Berlin, Meir Shapiro, Chacham Lublin, where you had thousands of people sitting in one room and learning.
No, I'm talking about younger kids, like Cheder.
Cheder was there was a guy in town, and he would teach a few kids sitting around a table.
No, I mean in the big centers. I mean, Poland had millions of Jews. There had to be.
Yeah, but you also have to remember that the risk of Jews leaving Judaism wasn't as high as it is today, right? So the objective of those who were preserving Yiddishkeit was not to make sure that the kids don't leave the fold, because they're not going to anyway. Where are they going to go?
But how were they educated?
Right?
Did they go to schools?
They weren't necessarily educated. They weren't educated in a major sense. They knew how to read Hebrew and knew how to speak a little Yiddish, and they did the halacha they learned from their mother in the kitchen.
They didn't go to secular schools.
They didn't go to any schools.
Didn't go to any schools.
Only in the 20th century started happening. Only in the 20th century. So that's when schools started.
Pre-Second World War.
That's when schools started to emerge. That's when schools, like the same time that not so long later, Beis Yaakov comes around.
That's women, yeah.
First with Mrs. Sarah Schneer, but it's only in the 20th century.
Yeah,
Before that, maybe 19th century a little bit. I don't even think so then either.
Teachers had to be paid. Schools had to be run.
They weren't paid much. That's the thing. They were paid very little.
You don't know.
Yeah. So maybe the tuition was.
You read a lot about arrangements.
Really low.
Really low, yeah.
You read about early chuvas where like
Paid
they're.
$1 a week or something.
Yeah, it was very little.
You also read about old arrangements where a few parents would get together and say, we'll feed this guy and we'll teach our kids. That's it. So he's a single guy or something like that, and he'll eat in our house and he'll teach our kids. That was it.
That's it. You didn't have to pay a teacher like for his real estate for a house. He would live in.
I actually, there's
a backer, just find a room somewhere to rent, and they come.
There's actually a great.
That's what it was. But I'm talking more in the
there's a great. So
centers of
it's actually funny.
Poland and
I remember there's a great book called "The Wandering Jew Arrived." It's a French journalist. It's not Jewish. It's actually an incredible book. You want to get a window into pre-war European Jewry. It's an incredible book. It's very highly recommended. It was written in French and was only translated into English in the last year or two. So that's why it's not so popular. But it's an amazing book. Anyway, so he describes there. I'm just remembering now. He meets a student in Warsaw who didn't live in Warsaw. Lived somewhere else, and he came to yeshiva in Warsaw. And he describes how this boy is telling him that he only got he barely got a table in the yeshiva. He used to learn somewhere in the hallway, and the yeshiva only provided one meal a day, which was a bowl of soup, and the rest of the time he got to fend for himself. So he'd be on the streets collecting, asking people, "I'll teach your kid a little Gemara if you feed me breakfast and lunch." And that's how he organized himself. Or he was just hungry. You weren't serving 3 meals a day and dormitory and all the rest of it. And didn't have that. Anyway, I was saying also another point is, talking about automation and learning a lot, is that in the past, the teachers and the rabbis in town who were responsible for preserving Yiddishkeit, their strategy was not to educate the masses. They didn't have to, because there's no threat of them leaving. There's nowhere for them to go. What they had to think about is, who's going to take over their position to teach Torah? So they had to identify 1, 2, 3 kids who they think can actually contain the scholarship that he has, so that it can preserve to the next generation. In our day, when we think about preserving Yiddishkeit for the next generation, we're not thinking about, we're not exclusively thinking about the 1 or 2 people that could become their of. We're thinking about the masses, because there is the threat of the masses leaving. So, and that's the shift that the Enlightenment brought, actually. So it already goes to the 18th and in the 18th and 19th century, where Jewish people within the Jewish world, we have people like Chassam Sofer, but even before that you have the Netziv, and the Tzemach Tzedek, and people of that generation were thinking about, okay, we have to start thinking not just about making sure that we have scholarship in the next generation. We have to start thinking about the masses who are going to go somewhere else to get educated if we don't educate them. Right? And that's a shift that brought about the big schools that we have today. So what I'm saying is that the fact that we have a tuition problem is a relatively new problem. So it's going to take some time till we figure it out. But in terms of the graph of 1,000 years, it's a good place we're in. Right. But if you're near to 30 years, if you put the graph only 30 years, it looks bad. Right. But in a much larger sense, I don't think we're in a bad place. We're in a very good place.
Reason of the huge paradigm shift is that, 100 years ago, or even less than that, when you talk about education of your children, you talk about your boys.
Yeah.
Now there's a paradigm shift. Now, when we think of tuition, we're thinking we have to put our girls into girls aren't left out. So 50% of the problem didn't exist.
That's also
years
true.
ago. The girls, whatever. They learned from their mother how to run on. But you had to worry about your boys.
Yeah, but that's what Sarah argued.
4 girls and 2 boys. It was like, okay, I have to worry about the 2 boys.
That's what Sarah argued. That's how she got even Chafetz Chaim's support. Chafetz Chaim was on the extreme right in terms of fighting enlightenment. She argued to him effectively that you have, here are your options, is what he's telling her. You can have educated boys, because you have big yeshivas, secular, uneducated girls, who the guys are not going to want to marry, because they have nothing in common, right? Or your other option is you'll have secular, educated boys in Torah, educated girls in secular studies, and then they're for sure not going to want to marry each other. So you're going to have a cross. Either way. And she effectively argued, okay, so we're going to open up schools for girls, which is an incredible. It's a very forward-thinking woman without abandoning Torah values. Is a very unique thing. So that's what makes her so revolutionary.
200 years was, like you said before, just very few boys got to go to the majority of the boys were just got a basic whatever they can find, some Gemara here, some Gemara there, and they married
even
girls
if they made it to Gemara,
girls who also didn't have much, so there was a perfect match. If
they made it to Gemara,
the higher boys that had to find a girl from a problem.
Now we have another thing coming, another thing which is going to change, which is already beginning to change. It's going to change, also drastically change the way Torah is learned and scholarship and education. Is the fact that you don't need a yeshiva to get educated. You have the internet.
Online, yeah.
With the internet, you don't even need a yeshiva to get educated. It's coming.
Schlicken's kids in China and whatever it is, they get their education on the internet.
That's going to revolutionize the stuff, and I actually think that it'll end up driving the cost of tuition down, because if you want, in other words, if you want your kids to, if me as a yeshiva, I want people to send them to me, I have to be able to compete with whatever the kid can get on the internet. Yeah. Otherwise, why am I sending my kid to you if I can get a better education at home online? So I think that's actually, it might be a solution to the tuition problem. It's going to come along with its own problems in terms of there's
going to be social issues.
Well, there's also how do you know what's right and what's wrong when you're looking at the internet? Maybe the guy's making a story up, which is another whole problem that we have to deal with. Anyway, these are things I think God willing over the next, we'll figure these things out.
But overall, I agree.
Okay.
More time for study, and certainly things are available never before.
Sure, what do you mean? I walk around carrying the entire Torah in my pocket.
Right. That's
Something.
The Zohar, that every child has
Exactly.
a full library, and
Exactly.
That's fulfilled.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
The other problem is, of course, the Yetzer. That's the thing. That's more free time people have. Unfortunately, it's wasted.
It's
on things. And that's the other problem. It's both. It's good for Torah, but also all the things that are that can lead a person astray are there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge. But it's true. Overall, we're definitely in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a wonderful historian who I like to listen to online. His name is Henry Abramson.
Oh yes, I feel it's
wonderful,
very nice.
And he has a very good analysis on on the change and the way we study Torah. He has some projections of what he thinks the internet's going to do. Either he'll be right or he'll be wrong, but he has very good analysis on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I see. He has good.
It's worth checking it out.
I see some stuff. Very well researched. Figures and
I also like the fact that he notwithstanding his academic historical research, he, so far as I can tell at least, retains a level of respect to the authenticity and divinity of Torah.
Oh, for sure, it's just no question.
Yeah, I know, but a lot of times historians will put their religiosity on a shelf and study his story as if not, but he doesn't.
He
integrates that with it.
Main players in Torah, I believe.
In what?
Torah College.
Yeah, in Torah College also. Yeah.
For a personal question about it, no problem.
But he integrates that with his. He integrates that with his.
Talking about history,
I've seen others who don't do it so nicely, but I like the way he does it.
He does it. Also, Rabbi does a very good job.
Yeah. Anyway.
You don't care for him, or nothing?
The problem is that when you go, whatever, you can either sometimes you can end up compromising on the historical data because you're trying to maintain religiosity, and sometimes it undermines your own research. Like, in other words, if you're looking at it from an academic perspective, you can get the sense that the person's bias towards religious reading, which is fine if you're religious. But if you're trying to attract a wider crowd, it comes off as inauthentic, and it's a very delicate balance, which I think Abramson walks very well. And that his religious incorporation of religious thought into his academic research doesn't compromise.
Well, it's both points of view.
Yeah, he doesn't compromise the authenticity, the academic aspect of his historical research. The accuracy I'm not worried about. Torah is Torah, and it's true, irrespective of what happens. But in terms of that's correct. In terms of what the secular gold standard of historical data, he does not compromise. His religiosity does not come off as compromising on that as well, which is a very interesting balance. Anyway, have a wonderful day and a good Shabbos, everybody.